Welcome to a special edition of Bella Vista and Beyond and the Mayor's Rep. We are adhering to the COVID-19 social distancing and other safety recommendations for this special broadcast. Also, we are broadcasting this program in the normal time slots for the Mayor's Rap Show, as well as the Bella Vista and Beyond show. Our special guest today is Mayor Peter Christie, with host J.B. Portillo. And now to the studio and J.B.
Hello everybody, this is J.B. Portello and I'm so excited to see you again. I took this opportunity to go gray, so kind of get used to the new look. I'm trying. And I want to introduce you today to my fellow co-host. I haven't given him a name yet, but this little guy has been my ride or die for several weeks now. When we filmed or videoed the police station earlier this year, this little guy was in a pile of really amazing animals and bears and everything that the police have on hand, and he spoke to me, so they gave him to me. So he doesn't have a name yet, but he's my co-host. Thank you so much. Mayor Christy, so glad to see you again.
Good to see you too. How are you?
Well, I am great.
Good.
Can we kind of talk, excuse me, what impact has this coronavirus had on the city, and how are you hoping to mitigate any downturn?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the first things that we have seen fall by the wayside this year, unfortunately, is the farmers market. The farmers market is actually operated and managed by the A&P Commission. They realized that this was probably not going to be a good idea, and I concurred with them. In fact, this morning I heard that the virus is now mutating. It could become even worse. It could be more contagious. They're talking not only a second wave, but 3 waves now. There's just too much unknown. And so I concurred with their thoughts about actually just closing it for this year. We did talk about curbside pickup. That's just not practical for us in that given location. Then there's additional piece of information that I don't think the A&P knew about, but I had just found out about it before they brought it to me, and that's that Cooper has signaled their intent to demolish the movie theater this summer. So that will create dust. It will mean that we would have to move the farmers market because of construction equipment, and there really isn't a viable place to move it, especially for electricity. When we were over at Mercy, the vendors wanted to have easy access to 71, and they needed electricity. And the current location is the only one that actually serves both their wishes. But we hope to bring it back next year. And I've received a lot of queries on email about it, and terrific support within the community for the farmers market, which is always very encouraging. Of a more serious nature is the impact on the sales tax. With the restaurants closing and other businesses closing, that's a major concern for us. We haven't been a city long enough to have any history on just what it might look like, so we were using a financial model that our finance director actually found through the Government Financial Officers Association, of which she is a member. So she put together a 3-tiered program of various budget cuts that we could go through. The first tier we had actually already put in place. I put it in place almost around the beginning of March when I saw this thing coming at us. And we cut out about $735,000 out of the 2020 budget. That's what I might call soft, fairly easy things to cut. Still a little difficult in some areas, but it's doable. And as of this morning, when I was checking through the accounts with our finance director, I was delighted to see that all the department heads are indeed cutting back, and the number of vendor checks, yes, I have to sign every one every week, has actually decreased. So that's a good thing. But nevertheless, we are going to take a beating on the sales tax. We don't know what it is yet. There's always a 2-month lag. So we won't see March until we actually get into about the 23rd of May, and then April, which I think is going to be a bigger hit, we won't see that till June. And then July will tell us a trend, because what then we'll have 3 months. Some of the other things that we're looking at are actually canceling or postponing capital over the next 2 to 3 years. And we're also looking at, as a third and last straw, what are some of the benefit programs that we can cut back. One in particular is we have a matching program for the city's equivalent of a 401k. If we reduce that, then that might be able to help us towards payroll. But we're not there yet. We're still at Tier 1 because we don't know what the impact is going to be. There are upsides. T.H. Rogers is as busy as always. We just saw our new residential housing permits for April. And believe it or not, at the end of April this year, we are already where we were at the end of June last year. So that's encouraging. That means that the building is still going on. Certainly, the takeout places have been thriving, and even the restaurants like Casano's and the POA are telling me that they're running at about 40% capacity, which is surprising. I thought it would be a lot less. So I'm anxious to see how it's going to turn out, and if we have to continue going down the road through the budget cuts, that's the first that I want to do. The whole goal here is to protect city jobs, because by having everybody at work, that means that we can still provide the necessary services for our residents that they have actually enjoyed for many, many years. And I don't want to jeopardize that. That's the very last straw. If I can carry on a bit more, JB, I would like to also talk about Turnback funds from the state. Turnback is state funds that come back to the city to help us with streets and on operations. And the governor announced about 4 weeks ago that he was going to cut back those fees so that he could plug some of the holes in his budget as he attempts to somehow react to the virus as well. And so they have announced that over the next 3 months we will probably see a 40% cut on our road turnback. That's about $120,000. Over the next 12 months we're going to see a 21% cut, and that's going to be about $400,000. So where do we find the money? I'm certainly not going to raise taxes, but we have an extremely strong cash surplus. In 2018, I brought an ordinance to council laying out a whole plan on how do we budget, how do we report actuals, and how do we actually preserve a reserve. And we were one of the first cities, and still one of the few, that actually have an ordinance or a law in the books that does that. So we agreed that we would always have 25% of our unrestricted income on hand. Unrestricted income is income that comes in that's not labeled for any specific project. A restricted income would be, for example, the Walton Family Foundation actually giving us money for trails. So we don't use any of that funds at all as part of our calculation of the surplus of 25%. So as of this morning, we have about $6.5 million in reserves, and our law, our ordinance at 25% dictates that we have to have 3.5. So we have a very comfortable buffer. So I'm hoping that we're not going to have to dip into it, but if we have to, then we're going to be okay. We're certainly going to be a lot better than some of the other cities in the land that I've been hearing about. The other thing is we have very, very little debt. We have about $630,000 in debt, 2 fire trucks, and half the cost of the streets building that was opened up in 2016. And then I'm happy to report that this year, at the end of December, that debt drops to $349 because these are 5-year loans. They're special loans for cities. And the first fire truck actually will be paid off. In 2021, it comes down again. And then by 2022, all loans are finished. So that means that the premiums that we're paying against that debt goes back into general operations so that we can use that for other things. So while there is a bit of doom and gloom hanging in the air, financially we're in very good shape, even though I'm sure that the sales tax is going to hurt us, but we can work around that. And again, as I say, number one, we've got to keep the jobs because we have to keep the services. Long answer. I'm sorry, JD.
Oh, no, please. We're glad to hear from you again. It's been a while, and it's important that we know what's going on. You know, I think what we're going to do right now is maybe take a quick break,
Okay.
and we'll get back to our talk in just a few minutes.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. Here is our host, J.B. Portillo.
Hi, guys. Good to see you again. You know, Mayor Christie, before we go on to some other really important questions here, could you talk a little bit about what guidelines you're using for social distancing and how that affects the city?
Sure, be happy to. We take our guidelines from the governor. The governor has declared an emergency declaration, and that gives him the ability to add directives, which you've been hearing all through the past month. If you get a chance, actually watch at 1:30 on any of the local television stations, and you will actually see the governor talk. So he has said, let's have social distancing, and that's 6 feet. It's actually, I think, up to 12 feet if you're riding on a trail, and that comes from the CDC. He also dictates how many people can be grouped together in a gathering. So you've heard him talk about 10. Now it's up to 50 for the large venues. And masks, he also talks about, so that if you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable that the 6 feet is being observed, then by all means grab a mask. Or if you just feel that for your own personal comfort that you would like to wear a mask, then by all means do so. But we take our direction from the governor. And we're also taking our direction from the governor about when are we going to open the city. So we have some easing off now on some of the restrictions. So we're looking at opening up the city gradually. We have a lot of people that are working from home at the moment, and it's my hope that next week we will have them all back in the office. We have a lot of people who have never left: police, fire, streets, building inspectors, and the code enforcement folks, as well as folks over at the library. While they're not open to the public, they're still working behind the scenes. Each individual department may not open a week later on the 18th. It depends. Our biggest challenge at the moment is the library. Trying to keep social distancing, especially with children, is going to be a challenge. So I believe the first step will be curbside pickup and drop off. You can drop off anytime now because there is a box there. And I might add that every book that gets dropped off is wiped and completely disinfected. Again, so we're going to make sure that the week or so, once everybody's back in before we open to the public, each department is going to put into place their social distancing, and what are they going to do to make sure that we are looking after the well-being not only of the employees but our visitors as well. You're going to see some changes. For example, if you go to CDS to get a permit, there will be plexiglass sneeze guards up. In fact, they're in place right now. And the two ladies that sit in the front at the counter now will have a plexiglass sneeze guard between the two of them as well. We're going to be putting them up in the checkout areas of the library. So it's going to be a very different world for a while, JB. All indications that I'm getting from the governor's office is that social distancing and group gatherings of 10, 50, or whatever he's going to mandate are going to be in place for a long, long time. I would suspect probably until we actually have a vaccine in place. I know the president is talking about actually easing some of those social distancing, but I don't really think at this point in time it's prudent to do so. There's just too much unknown about this virus.
You know, I think it's uncanny the way that you can read my mind, because I was going to ask you for somebody in the neighborhood about the library. Thank you for covering that, because that seems to be very important to a lot of people.
Indeed it is, especially since we have the new edition. It's pretty much finished. There's a small punch list that they're going through right now. It needs a good general cleaning, which we haven't been able to do because one of the mandates from the outset that I put into play was we canceled all cleaning, and we're cleaning ourselves.
Gotcha.
But we're going to have some good deep cleaning done before all the city offices open.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the status of the bonds.
Sure.
Or the bond projects.
Okay. There are 3 projects, if you remember. There's 2 fire projects. One is the replacement of Fire Station number 3 on Glasgow, and the other is a fire training tower built down off Chelsea. Then there's also the public safety building, which is the police and the court, that will be built up beside the streets building. We had originally hoped that we would go to the street to have the bond sold in May, perhaps June. However, with the collapse of the economy, the bond market isn't all that strong right now. So we're putting it off until the fall. But in the meantime, we are still moving forward with selection of the construction managers. We have selected 2 companies. One is going to look after both fire, and the other will look after the police project. That'll go in front of council on May the 18th for approval. After we get that, then we will go to bid for civil engineers and architects, and we will do the interview process and then bring those names back to council and have their approval as well. I would like to have that finished in June, so that then after their approval, the architects can start drawing up the plans. That will give us probably a better idea of just how much we think it might be. We are always on the conservative side so far, you know, when we put the bond together, but I'm all about watching the bottom line and making sure that we're not getting extravagant buildings. I want good functional buildings. So that's pretty much where we are. I suspect for the fire projects, might have spades in the ground by spring of next year, and the police might be able to start by May or June of next year.
Okay, well, we're all looking forward to all those things. What other projects are in the works right now? Anything?
Well, we've got the Sunset Road problem that has been around for almost 2 years. That's where the road collapsed as part of the Hull Dermatology project. I was on a call yesterday with Dr. Hull's architects, the general contractor, our civil engineer was on there. And I'm pleased to report there is only one minor change that has to be made to the plans, and that's in progress right now. That should be finished within the next 2 weeks, and then they will start. They need 124 days, so that'll put it around the end of August, and then hopefully we can put this behind us and we're off to the races and the road will actually open up.
Yay.
Yeah, yay indeed. And there's also the replacement of the Mercy Way Bridge. That is fully funded through state and federal funds, and it's a $6.1 million project. It will widen to 4 lanes. The south side will have a sidewalk, and the north side will actually have an extension of the Razorback Greenway on it, which has been funded by the Walton Family Foundation with great thanks. The total exposure financially to the city is less than $400,000 on a $6.1 million project. That's pretty good. We went and got as many grants as we could possibly find so that we would not be spending what we originally thought was going to be $1.2 million. There is also the building of the Blowing Springs Metfield Connector, which is almost like a spur for the Razorback Greenway. That construction was approved to start on Monday of this week, which is May the 4th. I haven't been out there yet. I suspect they're probably still doing some of the preliminary work on the GTS side, but that will be built. It'll take roughly 10 months before it's finished. So I'm really excited about that. That means the kids up there will be able to ride their bikes to school. Finally, there is the replacement of the bridges on 340 or Lancashire Boulevard. By City Hall is the first one, which goes over Little Sugar Creek, and then there's the one that goes over Tanyard Creek. Both of those are going to be replaced. The state is funding them. There's no city money involved. There are going to be bicycle trails attached to the bridge, more like the Razorback Greenway Trail, and that is being funded wholly by the Walton Family Foundation. So there's still lots happening.
Could I ask you a question? It comes up periodically, so I'd like to get it out there. Who is paid for? How is that Metfield extender being paid for?
It's being paid by through the generosity of the Walton Family Foundation, and the way it works is they actually give the money to us, and we have it in hand now, and then we pay the bills, and we have to report back to them at various intervals as to how the money is being spent, and at the end of the project we have to write up a final report. That's the same way that we're doing the tunnels on the central trails, which are now called Little Sugar, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you, because that always comes up somewhere, and I just want to get that out there as many times as possible to dispel any rumors. Okay, I tell you what, you have covered so much, and I've actually missed talking with you. Is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to say before we sign off today?
Well, just let me check my notes here. I might add, as part of the sitting opening, there won't be the ability to do just drop-in visits anymore to see me or to see other people who are employed by the city. You'll have to call first and make an appointment. You've probably seen that happening more and more in other places as well. Again, it's part of our social distancing. Anybody who comes in to meet with me, we will have to take your temperature, ask you some questions, and if everything's fine there, then we'll give you a mask. I will have a mask, and we will sit in the boardroom 6 feet apart, and we'll have our conversation. It's going to be a little awkward at first, JB, but I'd rather err on the side of caution.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for all this great information. We really appreciate it. We need to let people know what's happening.
You're very, very welcome.
You bet. Before we go today, I would like to take this time to acknowledge what fun, in spite of the fact that we're being closed here at the TV station, of the anonymous donor who gave us the funding to upgrade some of our equipment. Not only do we have wonderful lights that don't sweat you to death while you're sitting here in this seat, we also have new remote equipment that we can use to record the city and the POA, and we have some great new things, recording devices in the studio to work our way away from DVDs and onto regular cards. So thank you, anonymous donor, whoever you are. We appreciate you so much, and stay tuned because we're going to do our best here at the TV station to keep all of you informed of what's happening. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Times. You may also view this program on YouTube.com by going to Bella Vista TV. This has been a presentation of Bella Vista Community Television. Thank you for joining us.